Thank you, everyone, for taking time today to learn a little bit more about some of our products, some of eOne products. My name is Abby Cooper, and I've been with eOne for about 7.5 years or so, and have had the privilege of being around for our release of SmartConnect and SmartView, and have seen some really neat solutions created for customers from both of those. Both products ourselves. And so it's one of the things that's pretty close to my heart, if you will, because I know they've made my life a lot easier. So I'll tell you some stories about that as we go along. Now, certainly the Premier team can get a hold of me through my email address or by phone, but if you wanted to jot it down as well, certainly feel free to do so. Now, I have a teammate of mine on the line. Her name is Naomi. Naomi, if you want to give a shout out there.
Yeah, hi guys. Thanks so much for joining us.
Perfect. So Naomi and I are happy to help with anything that you need. We work really, really closely with Premier, and they're a great partner of ours. So it's a privilege to work with them. So let's go ahead and jump in. I'll give you my agenda for today. It's pretty simple. We're going to walk through an overview of each product, and then what we'll do is we'll dive into a few very high-level demos and have an official Q&A time. So first thing we want to talk about is SmartView. Now, those of you out there that are on the call, I'm certain that you're using SmartList, which is the canned reporting tool from Microsoft, or SmartList Builder, or both. Now, SmartView is actually a product that was made by created by our developer of SmartList Builder, and he wanted to address some of the features in SmartList that are, a little bit lacking. So we wanted to fix some holes in SmartList. Those features being the speed of the lists, the ease of exporting, the unlimited filters that are out there, the ease of really just working with the product itself, and the ability to actually see those lists outside of GP. Okay, so we'll go through some of those things as we take a look at SmartView. But you can think of SmartView as a replacement to SmartList altogether. Okay, so it allows you to see any of your canned smart lists or any that have been created utilizing SmartList Builder. I use this product every day for all of my sales reports, and I love it. And I'll show you in just a moment. But what I can do is I can easily access my favorites without logging into GP. I can then work with that same report, and depending on what I'm looking for at that moment, have a quick report available to take a look at and look at some of my sales data. Now, the other product we'll be talking about is SmartConnect. SmartConnect is an integration and automation solution, and what it does is it essentially allows you to connect any data source with any destination anytime that you want, and really via any transformation path. So as we look at the top data source options and we look toward the right-hand side, you can see some common data source types, like starting in places like a text file or an Excel file, starting with an ODBC connection or an OLADB connection. Maybe you want to drop a file into a folder and then schedule out an integration. You could do so. You could start with FTP or an XML. You could even start from InfoPath. So maybe you have an InfoPath form, and from that form you want that data then to flow to GP. That's something that you could definitely do with SmartConnect. Now, looking toward the left-hand side as well, you can see that we have a few other data sources that you might not have thought of right out of the gate, starting in places like a SmartList, or if you have Extender from eOne, the product that allows you to create custom windows and applications without running code, you can start an Extender. You can start really in nearly any GP module and automate transactions. We also have a connector with CRM, Microsoft Dynamics CRM, if you happen to be using that product, or for those of you out there who may be veer from CRM and go with Salesforce.com, we do have that option as well. Now moving down toward our next box, you'll see our when section, and this is talking about whenever you're wanting these integrations to happen, they can happen. So you can do real-time integrations, you can do external calls, you can do change tracking, which I'll explain in a little bit. You can schedule your integrations out, and if you want to, you could do manual one-off integrations as well. Now moving toward the third box down to our transform section, you can see that this is the area where we're talking about really making these integrations work for your specific business need. We've added in a number of areas where you can do things like add in a translation table or a calculated field, or do a SQL lookup if you wanted to, or add in some .NET scripting or chain maps together. Now, once I get into the actual mapping section where I talk about how you would set up these integrations, I'll point these areas out to you so you can start thinking of the different things that you can do for your specific integration. Now, moving down toward the last box to our destination section, you can see that we can send this information to GP, to CRM, to Extender. So keep in mind, SmartConnect is the only tool where out of the box you can use Extender as a data source or a destination. We can also write directly to a SQL table if we wanted to. We could export to a text file or Excel file or an XML. And we do have that connector with CRM or Salesforce.com. So if we were to take a step back and look at this as a whole, we should be able to take and draw a line from any of the data sources at the top to any of the destination options at the bottom. Okay? And the goal is really to make the integrations an easier process. You shouldn't need to have someone dedicated to saying, okay, now I'm moving this data from point A to point B. SmartConnect takes and makes those resources available to concentrate on something else, because you're scheduling your integrations, or you're doing external calls or change tracks, etc. Okay. Now moving on to the next section, just a couple things to point out. I know a number of GP folks started with the Integration Manager. You may still have an Integration Manager. The vast majority of our customers are Integration Manager upgrades, meaning they were not satisfied with Integration Manager and put SmartConnect in its place. And you might be thinking the same thing right now. Now, SmartConnect is faster than Integration Manager. So you can see my example that I've shared on the slide. We're talking about importing things like 10,000 customers and having SmartConnect take a minute and a half versus Integration Manager taking 4 hours and 40 minutes. I heard another customer testimonial, I want to say a couple weeks back, where they were doing 15,000 invoices, I want to say, not 15,000, I believe it was 150,000, and they got the integration down to 12 minutes with SmartConnect. So some neat things that you can start doing from a speed perspective. Now also, comparing SmartConnect to Integration Manager, SmartConnect allows you to integrate to more areas. So as you look at the mapping with me and as we walk through that, you'll see there are a host of different modules you can connect to, and you have those outside products that you can connect to as well. Number 4, skipping number 3, but we'll go back to it. Number 4 talks about an Excel push. So if you want to start an Excel and just pass your data right into GP, you can do so, and you can have your users utilize our Excel add-in for that. Jumping back up to scheduling, you're no longer dedicating that person to moving the data from point A to point B. You're actually just scheduling out the integration. And so much more, that's kind of all-encompassing, but automation, integrations with those outside systems, etc. Okay? Now let me switch over to my demo environment here, and let me just log in. And the first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to talk about SmartConnect. Okay, so we're talking about the integration tool to start with. The reason I want to start here is because it is a little bit longer of a demo, and I want to make sure that you can see all that there is to see with SmartConnect and ask any questions that you might have. Now we're starting in an Excel template. Now we have about 12 different data entry templates that we've designed that you can download right from our website, and there's no additional charge. But what you can do is you can allow your users to do their data entry in Excel and pass the transactions right into GP. Now keep in mind, as I go through this example, you don't have to use our templates at all. You don't have to force your current Excel files into a template. You could start with a current Excel file that you have, and you can configure that file to be used as a data source. And again, that first diagram, keep that in the back of your mind. You wouldn't even have to use Excel if you didn't want to. So we'll go through this example first, and let's just go ahead and add our batch ID. We'll just put Premier for our batch ID. We have our source document already completed here, and our transaction is set to standard, our transaction type. But if you wanted to, you could do a reversing transaction as well. We have our currency ID set to our US currency, but you can see from my drop-down, I can pull for my other currency if I did want to utilize another currency. I have my transaction date set and my company set. Now with our templates, you can see one of the nice things is that we're actually pulling the companies that are available to choose for this journal entry. So if you had a different company you wanted to have this transaction run to, you could go ahead and select that with the drop-down list. Now we'll go ahead and put a reference here. Rob, I'll just pick on you. We'll just say Rob's month and journal. And we'll do an account number here from our drop-down list. And you can see that when I select this account number, it's actually populating the account name that's listed to the right of that account number. Now I'll just do a quick debit and a quick credit for the sake of time. I'm just going to grab just a couple different account numbers. Not that this transaction would necessarily go this way, but we'll just grab this account number, we'll put in a $900 debit and a $900 credit, and we'll select Submit right in the middle. Now when I hit that Submit button, what happens is that I send this information to GP utilizing our SmartConnect web services. Okay, so I'm actually having this transaction created for me on the fly without logging into GP, and I get a message saying that the transaction has been successfully created. Okay. Now before we check that out, I want to point out a couple things. You can see down at the very bottom I have my SmartConnect config tab. This is what you would set up if you were utilizing one of your existing Excel files. You would download our add-in button, and you would set up this config sheet, and you would define your map, your web service, your company name, etc. Now there are instructions with the templates that you download, and we also have instructions otherwise if you're just utilizing the add-in for existing files that you have. Now let's just jump right into GP, and we'll take a look at our journal entry, and we'll just make sure that it did indeed make it in to GP, and we'll look at our latest journal entry. Perfect. So you can see at the top right-hand side we have our batch ID as Premier and our reference of Rob's month-end journal. We have our $900 debit and $900 credit. Okay. Again, we weren't logged into GP at all, and we had that journal entry created for us on the fly. Now, I'm going to show you one more example of starting in Excel and then pushing to GP. And what I want to show you is utilizing a piece of SmartList Builder. And this is actually utilizing Excel Report Builder, which is part of SmartList Builder. Excel Report Builder allows you to create custom reports and then publish them right to Excel. So as, let's say in this case, an inventory manager, I'm able to see my quantities that I have available within my warehouse without being logged into GP. And I have this Excel file, and what I can do here is I can look at these quantities on hand and what's available, and I can make a business decision right from this report and have transactions created for me. In this case, we're going to create purchase orders. Now I can see off the bat, just taking a quick glance at row 10, I have a negative amount of this item, which looks like it happens to be some form of a fax machine. Apparently there's a big run on fax machines right now. So I can see I'm low on those fax machines. So if I move over to my column N on the right-hand side, you can see that it's already populating with 346 for this particular item. And this is my vendor signature systems under column K. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to place an order for signature systems or create purchase orders. And we'll just say, you know, while I'm at it, let's order 50 of these, and how about 100 of these? We'll do 400 of those because I know this doesn't come in a quantity of 346. And we'll do 600 of these. Now I'll move up to the top to my Run Map option. And when I hit Run Map, what I'm doing is, again, I'm sending this information to GP without being logged in at all, and I'm having those purchase orders created for me. Now, not only is it creating a purchase order from this vendor signature systems, but it's actually creating purchase orders for any of the vendors that have the quantity to order column populated. Now, what's nice about this is we're looking at bulk transactions, okay? So moving a lot of data into GP or creating a lot of transactions right in GP, okay? Now, before we check this out, a quick story. One of our customers, McDonald's, their division that supports their, basically their cashier machines. So if something breaks with the cashier machines, this is the division that helps them out. So that division utilized Integration Manager for all of their month-end integrations. And what was happening is they were taking 8, 10, 12 hours at the end of the month, and they were breaking. You know, halfway through or almost all the way through, the integrations were breaking. And what was happening is they were passing over huge transactions, right? So they're passing over hundreds of thousands of line items, and it just wasn't able to be handled by Integration Manager in that case. What we did is we put SmartConnect in its place, and we got those integrations down to about an hour, okay? So some really neat things that you can do, not only with you know, data entry in terms of those transactions moving over, but also bulk transactions that you want to pass to GP. Now, if I just go back into GP, and we'll take a look at our purchase orders, and we'll make sure that we have the purchase order for signature systems that we had just chatted about. So we'll look at my latest purchase order here. Perfect. Here you can see we have our quantities of our fax machines. The quantities is 50, 100, 400, and 600. Okay? So again, we didn't log into GP, and we had this transaction created for us on the fly. Okay? Now let's take a look at SmartConnect itself so you can see what's behind you know, these integrations, how you actually would set up an integration. So I've accessed SmartConnect from outside of GP and outside of CRM. So what that means is that you don't have to take up a user license in order to add or to edit any of your integrations. Now, as you can see on the screen here, I have a number of integrations set up for my particular demo image. But before we dive into those, I want to point out a couple things at the very top left-hand side. You can see that we have our shortcuts to work with our real-time integrations, our real-time data sources, excuse me, our process errors, and under our Setup tab, we have our security listed. Now, your SmartConnect security is based on your Active Directory user, okay? Now, what this means is that you can really drill down on the security and give your users access to exactly what you'd like them to be able to see and to do within SmartConnect. So you can see at the very top, I have a user that has access to all of the maps, and they have access to do anything that they would want within those maps, whether that's create or change them, to import or export the maps, to run them, etc. And they also have access to all of the connectors. But I do have one user that has access to one map, and all they can do is they can run that map. So if you're like us, internally we have some people that are, you know, essentially super users where they can do everything with SmartConnect, and we have others where we want them to be able just to run one simple integration. Okay. Now let's go ahead and take a look at our integrations below that we have set up. Now you can see I kind of cheated there, but what I tend to do is I tend to actually group and subgroup. So I'll group by my data source and then subgroup by my destination, so I can quickly drill down to see, okay, here's my integrations that have a data source of an ODBC connection and a destination, let's say, of GP. All right, so let's take a look at our journal entry map from the start. And you can see that what I've done is I've defined my map ID and my map description at the very top. And the next thing I've done is I've defined my data source. Now we have 3 different data source types available. We have our bulk data load, our changes only, and real-time events. Now when you're dealing with your bulk data load, that's when you're bringing in information from places like your ODBC connections, your Excel files, your text files, any of your queries, etc. Okay? Most likely you'll start there with your integrations. Now the other 2 data source types are changes only and real-time events. And the real-time events are based on your GP or CRM real-time triggers. So an event in GP causing another one to happen. For example, every time you create a specific employee, maybe you also want to create a vendor card because you need to pay that employee expenses. So you can automate that that creation of the vendor card using a real-time event. Changes only, what we're doing there is we're essentially tracking any of the changes made in GP to a changes only table, and we utilize that table to run the integrations on a scheduled basis. So a perfect example of this would be a customer of ours that's located on the East Coast, and what they do is they actually have 20 companies in GP. And they have one of those companies that acts as the parent HR company. So any new employee gets added to that company, and if an employee leaves, they're obviously removed from that company as well. Now, the kicker is that these employees could also potentially belong to, companies 1, 3, and 5, as well as this parent company. So rather than having real-time integration set up on their system, they chose to do a changes only. So once a day, they have the changes that run from changes made from their parent HR company passed to the other companies that those particular employees belong to. Okay? All right, now once you define your data source type and your data source, your settings below will look just a little bit different depending on what you've defined. So here you can see I can select my connection type. I can browse out to my connection string as well. And then I can add my query in at the bottom here. Or if I select modify, I can work with my SmartConnect query builder. So I can drag and drop my tables in from the right-hand side, and I can link my tables together and essentially just build out my query. Okay? Now, the next thing you want to do is you want to define your destination. So today we're primarily talking about sending this data to GP, but what I can also do is I can send this to CRM, I can export to a file, I can write to a SQL table, etc. Okay? Now when I'm sending this information to GP, the next thing I want to do is I want to pick my group or my module that I'm working with. So today I'm working with GL, but if I wanted to, I could work with AA, bank rec, field service, fixed assets, top, payables, receivables, and you can take a look on through that list. Okay? Now once you've defined your group, then what you want to do is you want to define your node type. So since I'm working within GL, I want to, I would have the option to work with my accounts, my checkbooks, my account categories or currencies, my fixed allocation accounts, my transactions, or my variable allocation accounts. So that's going to change depending on which group you work with, okay? So keep that in mind. Obviously, if you're within SOP, your node types will look a little different. Now, listed at the very bottom are my available nodes. So you can see within GL and transactions, I can add a distribution, I can work with my analytics distribution, I can create a journal, I can update MDA, or if I wanted to, I can also write to an extender object. So those of you that have extender out there, it's really simple to add an extender object to your SmartConnect map. You actually just add the object here, and this is the object that I've added to this particular map, but I can add a new one by clicking the plus sign, and then I would select my company, my extender type, my extender node, and ID, etc. Okay, and then it's just going to add right to the bottom of your available nodes, and you can choose to group and map that if you'd like to. Now you can see today I wanted to go ahead and create my journal. So I just double clicked there, and now you can see my drag and drop mapping. So if you ever hear us talking about the easy drag and drop interface, this is where it's at. So you can see on the left-hand side I have my source columns listed. So these correspond with my columns from my Excel file. And on the right-hand side I have my destinations columns listed. Now all I need to do in order to map from my source to my destination is just drag and drop from the left side to the right side. Now on the right-hand side, you can see that I have a number of fields that are listed in red. That means that these fields are absolutely required by the business logic that's underneath SmartConnect. These fields are required in order to create the correct transaction. So in this case, in order to create the journal entry, we absolutely need to map our batch number, our journal entry number, reference, transaction date, and transaction type. Now if you look toward the right-hand side under your column types, you can see that for my batch number, I utilize a source column, but for my journal entry number, I actually utilize a rolling column. Now just a tip of the day, whenever you're seeing the rolling column, what that's doing is that's essentially grabbing the next document number, okay? That's where that rolling column comes in. Now you can also add in a calculated field here. You could do a local constant or a global constant. You could do a SQL lookup or add in a translation table as well, okay? So this brings us back to that transformation section, really making the integrations work for your specific business need. Now let's say you wanted to add in one of those other column types, like a calculated field. You'd move up towards the top left-hand side to additional columns, and you could go ahead and drop into columns here. And let's say I wanted to add a calculated field. I could go ahead here and add in my script for my calculation. So again, this is based on VB.NET or C# scripting, and I could essentially, in this case, manipulate some of my data. So maybe I wanted to manipulate a batch ID or a date format or something like that. I can go ahead and add a script here to create that calculation. Now on the left-hand side, you'll see that I have my source columns, my functions, my variables and helpers. I can go ahead and drag and drop those into my calculation as well if I'd like to. Okay? Now, on the knowledge base section of our website, we do have a few scripts that are out there, so you're more than welcome to just grab those scripts and use them if you'd like. Otherwise, I know Premier has a great team that's been trained on SmartConnect, and so if you need any work from them, you can certainly reach out to them for estimates as well. Feel free to do that as well. Now, a couple other things to point out. Companies option right in the middle. If you have multiple companies you'd like this integration to run in, you can just select the company name on the right-hand side. If you want to define where the information is going per company, so let's say you pass in a specific flag from the data source, and based on that flag, certain information goes to company A and the next information goes to company B, you can go ahead and add that definition here within this company's definition section. And again, this is utilizing VB.NET or C# scripting for that script. Now, this is not the same as integrating with intercompany. So if you're utilizing the intercompany module, have a chat with me after we wrap everything up, and I can share with you the steps that you would want to take. There's just a little add-on piece that you would need for SmartConnect in order to work with that intercompany integration. A couple other things to point out, tasks at the very top. If you would like to have a task run before or after the success or the fail of the map running, or if you'd like to do a document task, you can do so. So you can do things like copy files, you can move files, you can send an email. So this is something we do in-house. We actually have an integration that runs from our website. So anytime a partner orders hours or products on our website, we have an integration that runs to CRM as well as to GP. Now the integration that runs to GP actually creates a paid invoice for us right within GP. And then based on that paid invoice, if there's a line item on that invoice that's a service line, what it's going to do is we have a scheduled integration after that that creates a project for our team in project accounting for those hours, for those service hours that were just purchased. Then we have a task set up on the back side of that map that emails myself and a few other individuals on our team to let us know, okay, here's the project that was created, here are the number of hours on the project, the invoice that corresponds to that project, and who the project belongs to. Okay. Another customer of ours, Blue Cross Blue Shield, they actually use the email feature. So after their integrations run, well, I should say, if they have an integration that runs and it fails, they actually have an email that's sent out to let the appropriate people know that the integration had failed and that they can go ahead and fix it. Okay. So some neat things you can start doing. We have a customer down in Louisiana that actually chains a bunch of maps together. So based on one running successfully, they run another and another and another. Okay. I highly recommend the task option just because I know it's made our lives at eOne a lot easier, and I can't even begin to tell you the number of stories about how it's helped out a number of our customers that are utilizing SmartConnect for their integrations. Just keeps them informed of what's going on, and also helps them to tailor the integrations around their needs. So if they need to run, a SQL script, they can do that. If they want to run something before the map runs, they can do that as well. All right, one other thing to point out on the SmartConnect side of things before we jump into SmartView is our scheduling, okay? So as I mentioned in the beginning, what you're wanting to do is you're wanting to really move away from having to be so dedicated to manually moving the data from point A to point B and actually start scheduling these integrations out. So what you would do is you would do this, you would set up your map, so defining your data source and your destination, which is a one-time setup. And then what you can do is you can move into our SmartConnect scheduler and you can define when you want the integration to run. So do it daily, weekly, monthly, every minute of every hour of every day if that's what you prefer. So again, you set up this schedule and save the schedule within your map setup, and essentially you can walk away from that integration. Okay. Now I know I've done a lot of talking, but just to kind of recap on the SmartConnect side, we looked at the different data source options and destination options. We talked about how you can actually customize your integration and transform your integration to work for your specific needs. And then we looked specifically at a journal entry integration as well as a purchase order integration and walked through the mapping itself. Oftentimes at the end of the SmartConnect demonstration, customers are able to identify about 3 to 5 integrations that they can do just right out of the gate that they might not have been thinking of. So if you're thinking of some of those ideas right now, I would encourage you to jot them down and then spend some time chatting with the Premier team or chatting with me about them so we can see the best way for you to go about those integrations. One of my favorite things about being involved with eOne and about really selling these products is that they can be leveraged in so many ways that you're really getting, I hate to say it, more bang for your buck, but you're able to use SmartConnect in so many different areas that you might not have thought of just right out of the gate. All right, well, let's transition over to SmartView. Now, SmartView, again, just a reminder, is a replacement to SmartList, okay? So it doesn't replace SmartList Builder. You still need SmartList Builder in order to create custom reports where you're grabbing data from different tables and you're adding in calculated fields, etc. You'll still want SmartList Builder for that. But SmartView is going to replace SmartList for you. Now let's just go ahead and pull up SmartView, and we'll start with what's called SmartView Internal, meaning you're accessing it right inside of GP. Now let's take a look at our sales list here to start with. And we'll pull up our sales line items list. And you can see that we just pulled, if you look down at the very bottom left-hand side, you can see we just pulled 1,000 sales line items in 0.7 seconds. Now let's try to do that with SmartList just to compare. And we don't want to make our SmartList Builder changes right now. So let's go ahead and compare with our basic sales line items list. We'll wait 0.7 seconds. And I think you guys know where I'm going with this. We're only getting up to a few hundred sales line items in that amount of time. So when we're talking about huge lists, that is saving you a lot of time just working with SmartView. Now if we stay at the very bottom left-hand side, we're back into SmartView Internal. Let's just bump up the number of records here and pull as many of these sales line items as we have in our system. You can see we just pulled 1,039 sales line items in 0.72 seconds. Okay, so quite a quick list that we're looking at. Now, taking a look at the lay of the land to start with, we have our smart list on the left-hand side, and we have our columns that we can add to the list as they pertain to the list that we've selected, and those columns are on the right-hand side. Now, since I've selected my sales line items list here, I'm going to go ahead and move to the top left to my options, and we'll just hide those lists so I have more room, so to speak, to work with my report. Now let's go ahead and add a few columns here. You can see the nice thing is I have all of the columns that are available to me for this list right within a list on the right-hand side, and I can just drag and drop these columns to my list. So I'm just going to drag and drop the sales ID and the sales territory. Let's do, how about our sales date? as well, and let's get rid of this unit cost. We're just going to drag and drop that to the right side of the screen. Now I'm going to hide my columns on the right, and you can see that I had a lot more room to work with my smart list. So if I had wanted to add in a number of other columns, I could see those, and I could see them right away to screen. Another thing to point out to you, if you look toward the bottom at the footer of this report, you can see that I have all of my numeric fields totaled up right away. So normally what you're doing with SmartList is you're exporting that to Excel in order to get your totals. And with SmartView, you have access to those totals right out of the gate. Now let's do some rearranging here. Let's say I want to put my salesperson, we'll put their column right at the beginning, and let's do our sales date next to them. And how about we do the quantity next to our item number? And you can see all I'm doing is dragging and dropping those column headers exactly where I'd like them to go. I'm not moving through the menu structure and arrowing up and arrowing down as to where I want those columns. Now let's do some grouping here. Let's group by my salesperson ID. I'm just dragging and dropping that to the top. And let's group by, do a subgroup by my item number. Now I can see right out of the gate I have a blank salesperson ID, so I'm actually going to select my filter icon at the top right-hand corner of that column header. I'm going to get rid of any of those blank records for the blank salesperson. Now I only want to look at orders and invoices, so I'm going to select that filter and add in that I just want to look at orders and invoices here. And now you can see when I added those filters, what happened is I actually have a filter ribbon essentially down at the bottom of my screen, and on the very bottom right-hand side, I can select Edit Filter. And you can see here are the filters that I've already added through my column headers, but if I wanted to, I could add as many filters as I want. So unlike SmartList, where you get only 4 filters, SmartView allows you to keep going and going and going with your filters that you can add. Okay. Now I can do an and here, I can do an or. You can see how we've done that. We could also do a not and, a not or. We can add a condition here, or if we wanted, we can add a group as well. Okay. Now to fill out those filters, I'm just moving from the left-hand side to the right-hand side, selecting my column and my criteria, whether or not it equals, is not equal, begins with, is between or not between, is like, is not like, etc. You can see my options within my drop-down here. Now I'll complete that filter, and we'll just cancel on the blank filters that we added there. But again, I can have as many filters as I'd like. Now another thing you'll notice, with our subgroupings, we actually have subtotals as well. So not only do we have our grand totals down at the bottom, but we have our subtotals for each subgrouping. I can also right-click on any of my footers, and I can do a min, a max, a count as well. Okay. Now if I turn on my Find panel here, I can search across my entire report. So maybe I'm looking for, maybe I'm looking for a specific dollar amount, and I don't even know if that's in there. Apparently it's not. If I wanted to look for, let's say, how about 1990? It's going to search across all of my columns and find any of the fields that have 1990 in it. Now I can also, let's turn off the Find panel and let's just turn on this Auto Filter Row, and I can search across only one column if I wanted to. So if I wanted to turn on the filter for the green phone, it's going to go ahead and search on just that specific row. I'm going to turn off my green phone filter here just by exiting out. And another thing that you can do, just kind of again, a tip of the day, you can roll up any of these items that are expanded. So if I hit collapse all, if I just wanted to look, let's say, at Greg's information, and maybe I want to look at these items that Greg's been selling. It looks like he has one invoice out for this particular item. I can go ahead and quickly drill down to the information that I'd like to see. I can also double click since I'm in SmartView Internal, and I can pull up that sales transaction as well. Now since I'm in the internal option, I can bring up any of those GP screens because it's utilizing my go-tos, okay? Now the SmartView External option, which sits outside of GP, that does not allow you to utilize those go-tos, obviously because you're not logged into GP, so you're not bringing up one of those GP windows, okay? Now we've talked about filtering and grouping and subgrouping and moving this data around. Now, once you have a report that you want to see, a lot of times, what are you wanting to do? You're wanting to export it, right? So you can export these reports to Excel, to CSV, or to PDF. So we'll just go ahead and we'll export this to Excel. We'll just give it a name and hit export. And you can see I've exported this to Excel in seconds, and it kept my grouping and my subgrouping, and also exported my column header at the very top. Now, if I wanted to, I could also just grab a couple different lines. So if I just wanted to grab these 3 lines and do a copy and paste right to Excel, I could do a Control-C and a Control-V and copy and paste just those lines with the headers at the top. Okay? Now moving back to SmartView and staying up at the top, so moving toward the left-hand side, you'll see my Add option. Now I can go ahead, Rob, I hate to pick on you so much, but we'll just say Rob's favorite, and we'll give all users access to this list, and we'll say all companies and hit Save here. And then what happens is if I turn my list back on, you can see I have this new favorite. So rather than starting from scratch, I can go ahead and start from my favorite, which kept my grouping and my subgrouping and my filtering. Okay, so right out of the gate, I have that available. Now, for those of you out there that are, the folks out there that are the ones setting up reports for your users, SmartView is a really, really good option for those users, and I'll give you some great examples. Internally, we had been using SmartList, and our accounts person decided to move from SmartList to SmartView because obviously we want to use our own products, right? So she started using SmartView for all of her reports. And what she found was that she was taking about 5 to 8 hours on her reports, and that was utilizing SmartList. And once she moved to SmartView, she got that time down to 1 hour. So we're talking about nearly saving a full day's work of one of your resources on simple things like reporting. I heard the same thing from one of our customers that's located in Canada, and he was an IT manager who was getting requests on creating reports from his users. And these were simple reports where they wanted to add filters, and depending on the day, they wanted to see the report in one way or another. And what he did is he gave his users access to SmartView, and they were able to build out their reports themselves. So he went from 3 to 5 requests per week down to about 3 requests per month. So think of the time that he, as an IT manager, is saving as well. Okay. Now, a couple other things to point out to you within SmartView internal, and then I'll show you SmartView external. We've also created a canned age trial balance report. So this is available only with SmartView, and what it's done is it's designed to make that age trial balance reporting process a lot easier. So if you look towards the right-hand side, you can see that we can select our age as date from the drop-down box here, so you can just grab a calendar date if you'd like to. You can also choose to show your details if you want to or not. And then you can drag any of the columns over that apply to this particular report. So if I want to put my 30, 60, 90-day buckets in, I can go ahead and add those on the right-hand side. And you can see I can even expand here to take a look at that detail that I've chosen to turn on for this particular report. Okay. Now, let me show you one more thing, and what that is SmartView External. Okay, let me actually show you the process of logging into SmartView External. We'll jump to my desktop here. And SmartView External, again, is nearly exactly the same. It's about 99% of all of the functionality of SmartView Internal. It just does not have the go-tos available. So what you're doing is you're actually giving your users access to log into their reports without being logged into GP at all. And what you can see is that if we turn on our list and our columns here, I can go ahead and let's take a look at our vendors list, for example. I can see all of my lists on the tree view on the left-hand side, whether that's a canned list from SmartList or a report that we've created utilizing SmartList Builder. I'll see those on the left-hand side. So let's turn those off. And again, I'll see my columns that I can add on the right-hand side. Now let's go ahead and just add in a few fields. In this case, I'm ticking and unticking the boxes, and you can see how that added to the right. And let's take the columns off. And we can keep our grouping, we can keep our subgrouping, we can add in filters just like we did with SmartView internal. You can see the only thing we don't have access to is our go-tos at the very top of the screen, again, because we're not logged into GP. Now, I have a login to GP, but anymore, I hardly need to even access GP because I see all of my sales reports in SmartView external. It's nice and easy for me in terms of being able to look at my sales numbers and look at what's coming in on my reports and changing my reports according to the data that I need at the moment. Okay. So again, SmartView replaces SmartList and just makes working with those lists that you need a lot easier. All right, I know I've done a lot of talking and I've thrown a lot out at you so far. One thing to note, we do have bundle prices, so if you're looking at SmartConnect as well as SmartView, we do have bundles where you can look at them together, and you will receive a discount for bundling those products together as well. So thank you everyone for your time. I really appreciate it, and I will stay on for questions.